Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I want to thank each one of you for being here with us. I'm very grateful for my audience, for all your support, your presence, your intelligence, your intuition, your wisdom, and for being here with me and my guest, Mr. Larry Johnson is back. Thank you so much, Larry, for joining me today again.
Always a pleasure, Anya.
Thank you so much. There is a lot of things to talk about. I would probably mainly today focus on Israel and Palestine and that conflict. And I would like to ask Larry first, the best way to find you, is it on Sonar 21? Is there any other place for the audience?
Sonar21.com or Larry C. Johnson's at Substack.
Okay, and the link is already down below the live stream, so you can just click on it and it takes you there. Larry, the Pentagon has ordered a second aircraft carrier Eisenhower strike group to the Eastern Mediterranean Sea near Israel to deter Iran or Hezbollah from joining Israel-Hamas conflict. This is according to United States officials. You posted a very powerful post yesterday on your blog about the probability, very high probability, of escalation of this conflict. I would like to hear your thoughts. Let's start with this. Will this conflict that's going on currently in Israel escalate into the global conflict?
I think it's highly likely, unfortunately. It hinges on a number of factors. First factor is Israel has clear military superiority over Hamas in terms of it has tanks, armored personnel carriers, advanced multiple rocket launch systems. It has complete control of the air, so fixed-wing aircraft, helicopters can fly at will. What Hamas has is defensive positions that if what we've been told is true, they've had years to build, fortify bunkers and supplies under the streets of the Gaza Strip, so that any attacking force such as Israel, even though on paper it is numerically superior, has the edge, Israel would suffer a lot of casualties, more than that they are normally accustomed to. That happened to them in 2006 when they invaded southern Lebanon. Then they suffered, I think, 251 killed in action, and that created a lot of consternation inside Israel. So right now, at this stage, I think they've had over 800 Israeli Defense Force soldiers killed over the course of the last 9-10 days. That's unheard of. They didn't get those. It was only back in Yom Kippur War in 1973 that they suffered 2,500 killed in action. So Israel's ability to tolerate losses like that is going to go up. Then you have to consider the actions of Hezbollah and Syria and Lebanon. Israel has been extremely bellicose, extremely threatening, and instead of trying to subdue tensions with those countries, they are aggravating them. So on top of this, then now you put the U.S. Two carrier battle groups off the shores of Israel and Lebanon. The people who are designing this, they're making these decisions, are ignorant of history. Back in 1983, the United States sent battleships off the coast of Lebanon. We intervened in the war that was between the Druze Christians and the Shia Muslims, led by Hezbollah. And we started shelling positions of Hezbollah in the Bekaa Valley. Okay, Hezbollah, through a Palestinian by the name of Idmag Mughniya, organized a suicide bombing of the Marine barracks there in Beirut. It killed well over 250 Marines. And then that was in April. And then in October, 5 months later, they blew up the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. After that, the United States pulled its forces out, got out. So the possibility, people say, oh, that's crazy. This will never happen. A carrier being sunk in the Mediterranean. That could happen. And I can come up with a variety of scenarios. If that does happen, that will represent sort of a catastrophe for the United States, because we continue to go, sell the notion that we're invincible. And then the problem Israel has is it may be able to win the military battle in terms of killing Hamas, but the problem is they are not showing any discrimination. They're killing civilians as well. And in this age of social media, those images of dead women, dead children, dead elderly people, those are spreading throughout the Muslim world, throughout the Arab world, and igniting genuine anger. In fact, I don't recall during 67, the Six-Day War, or during 73, having this much potential unity across the board between Shia Muslims and Sunni Muslims, having Iran and Saudi Arabia united in this, having Turkey speaking out against it. This brings Turkey and Syria together. So Israel is creating a common enemy that the Arab Muslim world can unite against by virtue of its actions, because they are so indiscriminate. They are targeting civilians, killing civilians. It's not, they want to sell the notion, oh, we're only hitting military targets. Yeah, this is the same outfit that couldn't detect a Hamas attack, 9 days ago. Please, just, spare me all the hyperbole. Israel tries to use brute force, and they cannot kill their way out of this, is the bottom line.
Larry, I want to ask you, even though I have other questions, but since you brought this up, and this is something that I'm sure is on everyone's mind at this moment, as the world is watching that level of cruelty, I can't believe in this time and this DNA, we are not doing anything to help those people. Because I don't really know what percentage of Palestinians stands with Hamas. I don't think it's the point at this point, really, how we can help those people not to go through this. I watched on the map. I'm not really an expert in any of this. I just feel for those people. And
Right.
Looking at the map, I saw that this area of Gaza, there is one side which is southwest borderline.
Rafah.
It's all rocks. Yeah, it's all rocks. There is no place to cross through it. What's gonna happen to all those people, Larry? How the world can help? I mean, this is just like what we can do.
Yeah, this is it is the humanitarian crisis that I think is what's going to ignite this into a broader conflict, because the images you're seeing of these people, people need a certain amount of water a day. Well, they don't have access to clean water. Nobody's talking about the complete lack of sanitary toilet facilities. So the possibility of an outbreak of disease simply from the contamination caused by human waste, adequate food to feed them. It is not like Hamas is an organized military outfit wearing uniforms with established bases. They do live among the population. And Israel, notice the complete hypocrisy that when it comes to Israel, the United States and Europe says it's okay for Israel to bomb these civilian targets because Hamas is using them as human shields. When Russia would bomb schools and hospitals that were under the control of the Ukrainian military, the West reacted with outrage. They were livid. And yet, I do not recall any time over the last 19 months that the war has been underway in Ukraine that we have seen the kinds of images of civilians that have been killed or wounded by Russian bomb strikes, like we're seeing on the Palestinian side caused by Israeli bomb strikes. And that's only after a week. We have seen more human catastrophe and suffering in more than 9 days from the Israelis directed against the Palestinians than we saw from all of Russia's attacks over the last 19 months in Ukraine. Because the Russians were being very precise in hitting military targets and shying away from civilians.
Someone said here actually, and I want to bring this up 1 second. The war is against the Palestinians, not against Hamas. The latter is a false narrative. On that note,
Yeah.
Who gave Hamas the order to do it in that moment as they did it? Who initiated this, in your opinion?
Well, I don't know. I know there are lots, there are lots of, I'll call them theories floating around. Some suggesting that Hamas is a cat paw of Bibi Netanyahu, and that somehow or other Netanyahu allowed this to take place so that he could consolidate political power. I have trouble buying that, just for the simple reason that, one, within the various intelligence outfits, Shin Bet, Mossad, Unit 8200, they're not filled with supporters of Bibi Netanyahu. And if he did something like that, it would be very, very, very tough to keep secret. I think it's more likely that Hamas took advantage of the anniversary dates, with that being Sukkot and coinciding with the Yom Kippur War of 1973, to strike out. But I think there are a lot. I think you're right. There are larger forces at play, but I don't see this working to the advantage of the United States or Europe. Just the opposite. I think it's working to their disadvantage. Again, no evidence, just from a speculative standpoint. I could see someone making the case that Russia or China encouraged Hamas to do this, or maybe Iran encouraged them to do this in order to further weaken the West. Anybody that's standing outside looking at the United States, it's sort of like that movie with Mike Myers where he played the spy, and he had Mini-Me, the little guy, who would mimic his every action. Israel and the United States are sort of like that. Israel's the Mini-Me of the United States. And what you see in Israel is a chasm, a wide canyon separating the political sides. There is no unified position or opinion. And it's very difficult for them to come together. It's unlikely, in fact, even in the face of this current war. Same thing as in the United States. So I don't see starting this conflict as a way that's going to heal that rift and division. If nothing else is highlighted in the United States, there's still a majority supporting Israel, and the cable news shows are doing their darndest to hype the propaganda and tell only the Israeli side of the story, ignore the Palestinian side of the story, and claim that Palestinians and Hamas are one and the same, and that they must be destroyed. So it is, whose purpose does this serve? I see this as it's ultimately weakening the West, because the United States is no longer in a position to broker a peace there.
So, Larry, as Ukraine was a strategic place for United States to be closer to Russia, from my understanding.
Right.
Israel is the same strategic place to be closer to the Middle East. And now, looking at what's going on there, do you think we are going to witness this genocide? For how long? how they're going to continue with this conflict there, because at this point, what is really the focus for them? What is the goal? To remove all the Palestinians from that area, to take over that land? Like Netanyahu was showing in the United Nations that map, and
Right.
he crossed it with the marker. Do you think this is ultimately their goal, what they are striving for?
Yeah, no, I'd say that is the ultimate goal, to have created a reason to expel the Palestinians by getting them to abandon the land. They flee because of their concern for physical safety. That land is, quote, vacant, even though it's heavily urbanized. I mean, it's one of the largest concentrations of human populations in the world. So it's not like you got open, verdant fields where they can be planting olive trees and grazing sheep. It's just the opposite. But that's the hope. But I think they have bitten off. Israel has bitten off more than it can chew in this. And whether this was a deliberately contrived episode or whether it was, what we know for sure is that it was well planned by Hamas. Hamas didn't just wake up on a week ago Saturday and say, what are we going to do today? Cut the grass, wash the car, or let's invade the settlements of Israel. And it wasn't that. They planned it in advance.
Larry, can I ask you here,
Yeah.
who supports Hamas financially? Where its financial support comes from?
The reports are that it comes out of Qatar, and some of it has been provided via Israel, via the Likudniks, that they saw funding Hamas, helping create Hamas as a counterweight to the PLO back when it was considered a force for achieving the two-party state in the contested lands. So there are a lot of questions. I've also seen people claim the CIA created it. Now that's not true. But Israel has had clearly a relationship with it. I know that Seymour Hersh in his latest article reported very clearly that Netanyahu was providing funding to Hamas. And it was, they're doing it in order to try to divide and conquer within the Palestinians.
It just made me think about something. What happened in Hawaii recently, and the ownership of that land that was destroyed. Besides the historical religious reasoning here, because this is a long history here between Palestine and Israel. I mean, in that region.
Yeah.
Before Israel even. Do you think maybe this is one of the points as well, as far as the land grab? Because that location is a great location right next to the Middle Eastern Sea.
Well, I mean, this is really, this is so deeply tied up in history. And a lot of times when people talk about the Middle East, they think that they can finally get back to, let's call it ground zero, the moment of who was there first. And within the Israeli narrative, the Jewish narrative, going back thousands of years, claiming that they were the first ones that, and they were occupiers then too. I mean, if even the Jewish version of the Jews coming out of Egypt as slaves, fighting the Philistines, and so they were expelling other ethnic groups, which many might argue were in fact the forefathers of the Palestinians. What's really so disgusting and sad about all of this is, ethnically speaking, both the Palestinians and the Jews share much more in common, at least at the biological level, in terms of genetic material, than they're opposed. And Israel is playing the Holocaust card. They claim with justification that the Germans tried to exterminate them in World War II, and the rest of the world did nothing to try to stop it. And so that they needed to find a place of sanctuary. And lo and behold, they were going back, as they said, to our ancestral lands. And it was Harry Truman. He was president from my hometown. And it was Truman that paved the way for getting the recognition of Israel as a nation. But then Israel, initially there was an attack by the Arabs, and then the Israelis forced the Arabs out. And so, the blame game can go back and forth saying this side is right, this side is wrong. I just look at the numbers. If you look at the numbers of killed and wounded from 2012, I believe, until 2020, it's a 30-to-1 difference. With Israel is killing and wounding more Palestinians than Palestinians are killing and wounding Israelis. So if you're going to make the argument about who's going to get exterminated first, the Palestinians can at least show the numbers that they're the ones being killed and abused with more frequency than the Israelis.
Thank you, Larry. I titled this live stream with you today, Mossad, Hamas, and CIA. What do they have in common? And I would like to ask you, because there are some things that are obvious, and please, you're welcome to mention it.
Go ahead.
What are the things that those three organizations have in common that maybe many people don't know?
I'm not sure what they do, apart from Mossad and the CIA having intelligence functions and being bureaucracies. I don't think Hamas is a big bureaucracy, number one. And number two, I see Hamas being quite distinct from Mossad and CIA because they have a cause that they genuinely believe in. They're motivated by, freeing their land from Israel, as opposed to the motivation of the average person working in Mossad or CIA is collect their paycheck and get promoted. They're not pursuing some grand strategy or grand vision of the world.
Is CIA training or has trained Mossad to torture the prisoners? That's where this training comes from?
No. I mean, look, CIA had to learn that. The notion that CIA was involved with teaching torture, when I went through the training, what they were training people to do was how to recruit people. That's why I was one of the biggest critics right after the 9/11 attacks, when the CIA took the lead in doing interrogations. And there was torture used. There was waterboarding, sleep deprivation, other insects, but that came from outsiders. And I don't know the history of Mossad. I know the history of Hollywood. So the version that comes out of Hollywood and out of books, like, Vince Flynn was big on this, that the use of torture to elicit information, as they call it, you got the clock counting down, 10, 9, 8. We got to get the information to save the world, 7, 6, and torture, and in reality is just the opposite, that torture was not an effective technique for getting information that would allow you to prevent future attacks or actually penetrate an organization. Hell, even the Nazis, some of the Germans in World War II discovered that torture and abuse was counterproductive. But, it's happened. And yes, by saying that the CIA did not teach torture, they had to learn that from outside. I'm not saying that some CIA officers in the interrogation of suspected terrorists, as they would say, committed acts of torture and violence.
Thank you, Larry. I want to ask you about something that is Club of Rome. You've heard of it, right?
Yeah.
That works with Tavistock to create propaganda and crisis in order to manipulate the world's population in a predetermined direction towards a collectivist, one-world, socialistic dictatorship. And there is a book, The Science of Mass Manipulation Through Crisis Creation. As I understand, Tavistock Institute of Human Relations OSS was the origin for CIA. That
Right.
was created in 1942. CIA was created in 1947. And then we had the Muslim Brotherhood of Egypt. And apparently Israel helped Hamas to evolve after that. I'm not sure if I'm correct.
Yeah.
But we have Hamas.
Muslim Brothers started way back in like 1918, 1920. So they've been a long standing, they've evolved over time, but they started well before the creation of OSS and CIA.
But when I look at all of this, Larry, at this moment, I see, as this title of this book, The Science of Mass Manipulation Through Crisis Creation. That's what I see.
Yeah.
We are living in the extreme level of this mass manipulation through crisis creation, with, again, extreme level of human awareness, because many people, more and more, I believe, millions, are more aware of what's taking place around them.
Right.
And at this point, it's really hard for me personally to trust anyone as far as government or organization, this one or that one. I just look at the humanity as the regular people, children, are suffering.
Right. Well, look, we have seen, I don't disagree at all with your premise that when there is a crisis, there is certainly manipulation of information to propagandize populations and try to create a narrative that can be sustained. And so, like right now, with what's going on between Hamas and Israel, it is being portrayed as the terrorists, Hamas, want to exterminate the Jews. And therefore, they are Nazis. That's why Netanyahu wants to call them Nazis. They want to tie that imagery together with World War II, and that will justify the Israeli attacks on, quote, Hamas, except they're not just attacking Hamas, because there's not locations with the address of Hamas and, we live here, attack us. They are attacking civilians and killing civilians in large numbers. And and this is the big if Israel decides to cross into Gaza in any kind of depth and tries to take over a territory, it is going to be a very bloody fight, I believe. And in that, Israel will then be killing more civilians. And those images, as they pile up, no matter how much the West wants to control the narrative of Palestine bad, Israel good, Jews trying to survive a new Holocaust, the new Nazis that have arisen, that narrative is not going to fly. It will fly. It will work inside the United States. It'll work within some of the European states, but the rest of the world is going to reject it. And that's why I come back to saying we're seeing the possibility of a unified world outside of the Western hemisphere, Western hegemonic influence, that's going to leave Israel isolated in a way that it never has been in its entire history, 76-year history.
How, in your opinion, before we end the live stream, I have like 2 more questions only.
Sure.
What will be the reaction coming from Russia and other countries that don't agree with this? Do you think they're going to take any steps towards this? Any peace talks are possible or completely out of the picture at this point?
I know Russia, it looks like Russia is working with China and is working with Turkey to try to see if they can cobble together, and with Saudis to cobble together some sort of negotiated settlement to get the sides to separate and stop the killing. Russia has been, I think, very consistent, and it has really eschewed the notion of killing civilians in the name of, well, we're a threat, so we've got to justify it. No, they've again, do you believe that the Russians are so powerful that they could quash all social media and prevent the images of dead children and dead women? And no, they couldn't. And we haven't seen that. Even after, very aggressive military strikes and huge explosions, they're hitting infrastructure, they're hitting military targets. They're not killing civilians. The Israelis are killing civilians and killing them in large numbers, disproportionate numbers. And they justify, well, they killed our people. Okay, that's true. But now you're killing more of theirs. And the notion to try to argue that makes that right is just, there's
I
no
mean,
foundation.
sorry to interrupt you, but this is like very, very emotional. How can you first tell the citizens to evacuate, order them to evacuate, and then you kill them on the way while they're evacuating?
Yeah. No, it's and the Israelis come back and argue, oh, that was Hamas that planted a roadside bomb and, to blow its people up to force them to stay. And, I've looked at a couple of the different videos, and the one video that they show of what looks like to be a roadside bomb, but then the other videos from the column that was hit are in two different locations. So, there's massive propaganda flowing in this. What ought to happen is allow at least a UN force to go in to accompany to provide a cordon sanitaire for the Palestinian civilians. But it's like they shouldn't have to be evacuating their homes anyway. It is their homes.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
That ought to be, instead of accepting it. I said, no, Israel, you have no right to destroy their homes.
Larry, how much of those images, in your opinion, is CGI? How many of those images are generated clips from some different events that took place? There was an image in Afghanistan just before I just want to say this. You remember that image when they showed a lot of people while the plane was trying to take off, and those people were literally almost glued to that plane in Afghanistan,
Right.
trying to escape, which is completely not possible. If you study it, right, you know this.
Right.
With a plane as such, with an engine as such, no one could be in such a close vicinity next to the plane. It's impossible. They would die. It will suck them in.
Right.
How much of these images that we see are the fake images? And I'm talking starting with Israel first. And then are there any from Palestine? Palestine, I know there is suffering, but what do you think about those first images that we saw?
Well, I think the images of the attack on the rave dance, I think those were legit. That was not made up. And the casualty, you can't make up those casualties. That this is like, what I call some of these 9/11 truthers. They insist that the people who were on the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center, that the government took them and exterminated them. Say, yeah, please. We're talking about living, breathing human beings. I think that attack, I don't know what Hamas was thinking in doing that attack, because if they had not done that, they'd focused on just hitting the military bases they would have had an incredible victory. I mean, and they did have a tactical victory over Israel, at least for that day, because they killed a significant number of experienced special operations forces for Israel. It really was it hurt Israel.
And how was that possible with intelligence like Israel has?
Well, see, this is part of the problem. I've dealt with Israelis over the years, the Israeli military, Israeli police. There's an arrogance like I have never encountered in any other country. The arrogance of, we know best, we know more, we are so much better. Even down to they insist that their method of shooting from a sidearm, drawing from a holster, theirs is better. because they don't put a round into the chamber. They chamber it when, eh, the arrogance is the problem. You get so overconfident of what you can do, and it is not to disparage the Palestinians and Arab people, but they were not a first world peer fighting force. They were not a first class army. So it's like if you're the biggest kid on your block and you're able to beat up all the other little kids, and then you think you're a great fighter, well, that's because you've only been fighting the little kids. I mean, look at what Israel's going up against with tanks, armored vehicles, airplanes, a variety of missile systems, drones, against guys who are outfitted basically with some rifles. They may have an artillery piece or two scattered around, anti-tank guided missiles, maybe. But I mean, it's such a disparity. And yeah, if Israel can't beat them, Israel's in real trouble. But part of it is the Israelis aren't that well trained. I think you probably saw my article the other day. I received I get all this spam, and this one message comes across pleading, donate money to buy body armor for Israeli soldiers. And it's like, are you kidding me? If you're going to have an army and you're going to put soldiers out in the field and the possibility of combat, it's sort of standard that you supply body armor. You buy it and procure it ahead of time. The fact that they don't have enough, hadn't procured enough, and they don't have a ready source to go to is just exposing Israel about all their talk about we're such a great military power, and yet they can't provide body armor for their own soldiers. So, spare me the hype.
Thank you, Larry. And when you were saying about this arrogance and comparing, what came to my mind, I know this is a little bit maybe off the topic, however, it might make sense. You remember Pele? Pele was one of the best soccer players, right?
Yeah.
The way he grew up and how he was learning how to play football barefoot.
Right.
And who he became.
Right.
And this is what's happening actually, especially in the Western world. I'm not saying in Asia, other countries for sure too, but is this appearance, is this image, is this illusion, is this very Hollywood-like idea of who people are or state is or army is. And when it comes down to the rubber hits the road, then you have the regular, maybe not fully equipped, who can perform much better.
Well, yes. I mean, I don't mean to trivialize it by using this parallel, but one of the reasons you get so many kids from the Dominican Republic and from Venezuela that come to the United States and excel in playing baseball is when they're playing at home, they don't have the money for all the brand new equipment. So they're using improvised devices. And a lot of times in the Dominican Republic, they would actually use bottle caps that are, this small. Well, a baseball is that big. So, and they'd be hitting the bottle caps with broomsticks. So when you get used to hitting something that small with something that skinny, then all of a sudden you get a real bat and a real ball. Oh my heavens, you perform at a different level. And there's some element of that here that Hamas, because of let's call it its relative poverty compared to Israel, is forced to do some things to improvise, as they did with the hang gliders. They had apparently trained. They clearly had to have trained on that and perfected what they were going to do in terms of getting across the border and being able to launch a strike without being detected. But the other element that is here is this notion that they have superior intelligence in both the United States and Israel, and we don't. I mean, that was clearly demonstrated in the initial success of the Hamas attack. And the reason Israel is delayed so far in responding militarily is they don't have enough equipment. The soldiers are not ready, and they're having to do some quick training to try to correct some of the deficiencies.
Last question, Larry. Thank you so much. About location of Hamas. As you said, they cannot be really located, right? So as I understand, they can be somewhere underground. They can be even outside of Gaza and many other areas. So how are they really fighting with Hamas if Hamas is all over the place?
Yeah, well,
I
that's
don't
why
know. I'm just thinking.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's why they're able to justify bombing all these civilian locations, because they claim Hamas is intermingled with them and is not standing out on its own in a place where they can be attacked. I did see an artificial image. A friend of mine sent me. He said, "Oh, here's one of the tunnels of Hamas." And then as you looked at the image, the guy would start moving backwards into the tunnel, except he wasn't walking. You could tell he wasn't walking. So right away, you knew that was just an artificially created image. If you've been on some Zoom calls, they give you a choice. You can create an artificial background of looks like you're sitting in the Sahara Desert, or that you're sitting on top of Mount Everest, or you're on a beach in the Caribbean. It's that kind of image that was generated over this tunnel. I'm sure Hamas has tunnels, but they're not going to produce images of it or allow them to be located in any way.
Thank you so much, Larry, for your time today. I have more questions, but I don't want to keep you longer.
That's all right.
Yes, you sure? Okay.
I'm at your disposal.
You know what? Thank you. You know what I really want to ask you? Something that has been on my mind today when I was looking at the map, and I was thinking about Epstein Island and about Ghislaine Maxwell and about submarines. And you know where I'm going with this, because the access to water and even those tunnels that you just mentioned and other places, I don't think I have any doubt that there is again another great opportunity for many of those evil people to have more human trafficking going on.
Yeah.
I just want to hear from you. What do you think about what I just said?
Oh, no, I think that is always one of the consequences of these kinds of wars, that, desperate Palestinian women in particular could be taken and convinced that they're being taken to a safe haven or provided with work. And the next thing you know, they're forced to engage in prostitution. Yeah. So I think it's definitely a possibility. The other thing, don't forget, so the tunnel, there is the border crossing above ground, but the Israelis and the Palestinians have had underground tunnels going into Egypt that have been used for smuggling for as long as Gaza has existed. And I want to emphasize it's not just the Palestinians. I mean, in many cases, they're working with Israeli merchants. That the money has a way of making all these national, ethnic, and religious differences go away.
How is Ukraine in all of this right now? The topic of Ukraine has been pushed aside as we speak. The founding is not as eager, as it used to be. What's going to happen to Ukraine now, Larry?
If you've ever been in a household where a family has one child, and then mother gets pregnant, gives birth, and you bring the new baby home, and the new baby gets all the attention, the new baby's Israel. Ukraine's not getting the attention. Ukraine is being ignored largely. And it's coming at a time that Ukraine's not able to achieve anything of any military consequence anyway. They're getting beaten badly. They're being driven back. So, Zelensky's, I think, desperately trying to figure out how to recapture Western attention. But, he hasn't produced a victory. All he's produced is loss after loss after loss, both of equipment and manpower. And, Russia's been taking its time. and has really turned the tables on them. So it is, and notice how quickly. So this happens. The United States immediately within 9 days has moved 2 aircraft carrier battle groups there. It took the 101st Airborne, which was deployed in Romania, and pulled them out of there, sending them, I don't know if it was to Turkey or to Jordan or to, but they've been deployed somewhere in the area. So, and they've moved a bunch of F-16s forward as well, 100 planes. Well, so the United States is really throwing in all, a lot of military show of support for Israel. I'm not saying it could necessarily be very effective. Or let's put it this way. Yeah, the F-16, it'll be incredibly effective because it's bombing civilians that can't fight back. They're not entering into an atmosphere where they're having to go up against air defense systems like what Russia has, or combat aircraft that Russia has. So, I mean, it's just, it's a distraction, and it's being played out heavily in terms of the politics. If you have a chance, go online and tune in to like Fox News or CNN or even MSNBC, and you'll be, I think, shocked at the coverage, which is, they've hit upon the storyline of Israel is, it's the David and Goliath conflict again. Hamas is Goliath, Israel's David, fighting for its life against this terrible beast. And we, the Americans, need to do everything in our power to support Israel. That's the message that's coming across.
There was an interview, I think, in Australia, one of Australia's network. I'm not sure if it was Sky Australia and Sky News. Former Prime Minister, I think he was, of Israel, who said that he doesn't really care if there is any water, any electricity in the hospitals, if those babies are dying. Very, very cruel words. But, just recently, Larry, and I said this today in my video that I posted, Biden, or whatever it is, whoever it is, gave an interview on CBS, 60 Minutes, and he said that US still has to support Ukraine, give aid to Ukraine, send aid to Ukraine, because if it doesn't, we know the story, Russia will invade Poland, and Poland will be next Ukraine. So within this conflict, and I promise this is my last question, why he's still dragging this narrative if they already have so much cruelty and such a, please everyone forgive my sarcasm, great opportunity for the events taking place there in Israel? Why he's still dragging that part of the world, Ukraine, Poland, into another financial aid support?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, there's a disconnect between the talk and the reality of what can be done. So you're just saying, oh yeah, we're going to continue to support Ukraine with what? We right now cannot produce the volume of artillery shells they say they need, and yet we're promising to provide those artillery shells to Israel. You can't do both. The same thing with Patriot battery missiles. So the United States doesn't have the luxury of warehouses that are stuffed to the roof line that need to be emptied out and sent to other places. We've emptied those warehouses. We're running on empty, and we continue to push this absurd notion that we can fight a two-front war, and we can't. We tell ourselves that, but it's just not true.
Thank you, Larry. So that was my last question, as I promised. Thank you so much for coming today. There is a link to Larry's website and blog, Sonar21, right under our live stream. You can find it in the description box. And also to my locals community, Rumble, join my mailing list as well, as I always say, in case, because you never know with YouTube, Instagram, and if you want to support the channel, you have links there as well. Thank you so much, Larry, for all your knowledge, for coming on today and all your time. I really appreciate it.
You're most welcome, Ania. Anytime. Always a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you guys for watching. We see you next time. Bye-bye.